Welcome to HiveTribe, a podcast for influencers, innovators, and fans of the gaming industry. We're here today with Marcus Esports Howard. Excited to have him on and talk about his book that he's going to be releasing within the next year here, probably looking at winter, right, Marcus? Excited to have you on. Why don't you introduce yourself to our fans?
Yeah, fourth quarter this year. Thank you for the opportunity. And Marcus Esports Howard, formerly Marcus Blockchain Howard. I had somebody on LinkedIn say the Marcus formerly known as Blockchain.
I like that.
I got Super Mario Brothers 3 for Christmas when I was 6. Been playing video games ever since. In 2013, my brother and I launched an indie game search engine, a multimedia search engine to solve game discovery. At the end of last year, we saw the writing on the wall and pivoted into an experiential marketing agency. And we're currently building a online platform for intramural esports that lets an entire campus community, faculty, staff, and students engage and compete in a social community leveraging gaming. And as part of that, we're launching a companion book because we're also launching a digital course on esports, gaming, and blockchain. So not only are we launching the platform, we're helping the colleges understand how to embed gaming, esports, and blockchain into the core of their students' educational and social experience.
So the book itself is not just a platform for people outside the industry looking to get in. It's also for students, universities, people that have like a mass group of people, giving them the ability to create community within the esports ecosystem.
Exactly that. We've got 3 target audiences. The first group is students and their parents and schools. And we now have a guest appearance. My daughter's here. She's not wearing a shirt, so you're going to go that way. But for people who don't understand the industry as a whole, who want to understand it, and also, again, businesses, because they want to understand how this can add to helping them achieve their business goals. The second group, Maddie, go this way. The second group is for people who are traditionally in the gaming industry, the larger $152 billion gaming industry, who are hearing all about esports and want to learn how to get in and be a part of all that action. And then the third is for people who are primarily in the esports space. So your live streamers, your competitive players, your teams, your managers, et cetera, who want to learn more about the games other than the fact that that's the game that they're playing for a prize. So it's those 3 groups. This book is designed to speak to all of them collectively.
And then, as we both know, the esports ecosystem represents about 1% of the overall gaming ecosystem. Does your book focus on the 1% that is esports and providing knowledge and information, awareness, ability to get involved on that focus, or is it a broader approach to the whole system?
It's the whole system. And I don't know if you saw I posted on LinkedIn that I think this is part of one of the most ambitious projects I've ever done, because I want to acknowledge and respect and celebrate both pieces. I think it's 2 sides of the same coin, right? Esports exists only because of gaming, but esports is also contributing to gaming, right? So I want this to be an entry point for someone who may only be interested in building a career or business opportunities in esports, and also people who are looking for the other side of it, who want to build a career or business opportunities in gaming. It's not an easy thing to do, especially because of also trying to summarize all the innovation across North America. So I've got some innovators out of Canada, here in America, and a handful in Mexico.
Yeah, I mean, look, we often refer to this as the Wild West, right? Because there's new opportunities and changes in the industry literally daily. And keeping up with that is what people are willing to pay for at this point, right? So you're providing a very valuable resource in just knowledge gap for people that are new to it. When I talk with young people that are looking to get in to esports and gaming in a professional side, not as an actual player gamer, but as somebody that's working in the nuts and bolts, like they often ask, how do you get started? Is it like an industry where you got to know somebody? And the answer is kind of yes and no, right? Like there's just so many of us that are involved in the professional side and growing rapidly that there's opportunity everywhere to establish yourself. I think it's the ultimate industry to create value on your own and by your own initiative. So you don't need to have a certain resume item to get involved, but you do need to be willing to put some time in, right? Like you're writing a book and working on a project right now that probably doesn't have a ton on the upfront. It's a lot of sweat equity and time that you're putting into this and effort, right? And it's making a huge impact on the industry, and it's going to have a huge impact on the people that you're connected to and the resulting conversations and relationships that develop. So can you talk a little bit about how, as a professional, like some of the first things that you got into to get involved with esports, and getting your toe in the door and starting to like work out as a professional within the industry?
Great question. And just before I answer that, I want to speak back to the book. So two of the other things that will be key components of the book, one is a glossary of popular gaming and esports terms, again, as an educational resource. And then the other piece will be a list of links and other resources where you can learn about job and career opportunities. It might be unpaid internships, paid internships, projects, festivals, which might mostly be digital at this point.
Right.
But in creating that open door for people to get their first step into the space. But I got into esports in 2017 when DreamHack expanded first into America from Europe.
Mm-hmm.
It selected, I believe, 5 host markets, and Atlanta was one of them. And I was blessed to get this opportunity for us to expand our indie game arcade into that total experience. My brother and I created this kind of localized experience for introducing kids to games that were nonviolent and also introducing their parents to games that were nonviolent that just coincidentally also happened to be games from independent game developers. So we were able to curate an amazing list of games from around the world and have something that was, a fishing game and a racing game and a puzzle game,
Right.
Just different types of experiences so that, because parents just generally think that everything in the gaming industry is a shooter. And
Right.
most of the media about everything in the gaming industry is about shooters, but that couldn't be further from the truth. So we got the invitation to bring our indie game arcade to DreamHack in 2017. I also got to speak on a panel there, which was amazing. I spoke with Zeke Sparks, who is the co-founder of Blue Mammoth Games that make Brawlhalla, which is now in Ubisoft Studio. So they were formerly. And I got to see firsthand everything that was happening in esports. And right there it clicked. I knew, we unofficially started our pivot into esports from that weekend.
Right.
And grown from there. 2018, my colleague Sebastian and I co-produced iHeartMedia's first esports event at Andretti's Karting in Atlanta. Last year, we did another event up at Access Replay. And now I just consult with different companies, helping them understand that. Some of my past clients include Consumer Technology Association, obviously iHeartMedia, Beasley Media Group, and even Junior Achievement here in Tampa Bay.
Gotcha. Awesome. Yeah. Shout out to Ali Young and Access Replay, a great organization and one that's got some ambitious growth plans for the next couple of years. So it'll be exciting to watch their development. Speak a little bit more on the kind of indie side of the gaming industry. You touched on it there that, the media seems to indicate and mislead parents into thinking that all gamers are playing first-person shooters. Fortnite's popularity doesn't help that perspective, right? Because kids are, in high school in particular, playing that game an awful lot, right? And on a previous episode, we talked about how, especially during the pandemic, Fortnite's very healthy for kids that age because it gives them a sense of community. And it's more about that than it is about anything else. And I think parents are coming from a place of not understanding. They think it's just a first-person shooter, but not under. One of the challenges that we as professionals in the industry face is educating that generation on the healthy parts of esports and gaming. And I think part of that mission is making them aware of the fact that not all gamers are just gaming in a first-person shooter. So, speak a little bit to more of that 99% that represents the rest of the gaming community.
Sure. And I just want to preface that statement with there is no research that links, violent video games to school shootings.
Right.
And some research suggests that violent video games may actually be an outlet for aggressive behavior as opposed to enacting that in real life. But the perception is certainly there, right?
Right.
It's easy to point the finger at games. And I think it's unfair to isolate gaming as like the boogeyman for violence in influence for younger audiences? Because there's violence in media across the board, movies and TV and music, right? Why do we all have to point our finger at gaming and blame it for all the violence in society? But to answer your question, 75% of at least all PC games are made by independent game developers. And most likely, it might be 75% of all games across all ecosystems, mobile and VR, et cetera, blockchain games, especially as that's an emerging market. Mostly because the access to those tools have been, they've never been cheaper or freer is not a word, but they've never been more free and more accessible, I guess is the word I'm looking for. So anyone can create a game. And that's how you end up with some of these novel concepts, because a lot of the independent game developers that we worked with over the last 7 years make games as a passion project, right? They have a vision, something very niche focused that they want to convey as an interactive experience. And so they were able to deliver something novel to the ecosystem. Whereas, comparatively, if you look at, I'm not going to bash AAA games like Madden or Assassin's Creed, these mainstream titles are looking for mass market share.
Right.
And that's how you typically see the majority of the innovation in the gaming industry come from independent video games. Minecraft started indie. I believe that League of Legends started indie, depending on which reference you look at, although people larger debate about, what is indie? Rocket League certainly came from an indie studio. I use League of Legends already. Brawlhalla started indie.
Yep.
Plans technically started indie.
And we're starting to see some organizations lean into those titles, though. That some of these more, they're just not popularly public facing. But Brawlhalla, the World Showdown of Esports, is doing an event in October featuring that. So they're starting to get more screen time in a popular way. I will say as well that, let's talk about some of the inherent value that exists in esports and in gaming as a whole within that category of indie. I talk to a lot of brands that say, our demographic doesn't game. And I'm like, that's not correct. Just as and that's when I throw the sale out the window. I'm like, forget about it. I don't even care if we do something or not. I need you to know that statement is false. Because we're dealing, they'll say, for instance, one of them was a coffee creamer company that uses non-dairy products, fairly new. And they were like, yeah, our demographic or the gaming demographic doesn't drink coffee. And I was like, that's an absurd statement. And then they went further because I pried on that. And then they went further and said, well, we just don't feel like there's good alignment. We're going after mothers and fathers and people that are in this certain age demographic that's a little bit older for the gaming audience. I was like, okay, everything you're saying just indicates a lack of understanding of what esports and gaming really represents. And there is a title for every single demo. I got in with a major antiperspirant company recently that when the conversation started, they were like, we're looking for 35 to 45. We don't feel like gaming can achieve that. And I went out and I got infographics, which you can find infographics on anything within esports and gaming right now, and I found one from a pretty respectable resource, Newzoo, that indicated, hey, if you're in that 35 to 45-year-old male range, you're playing racing style games, right? And then, there's resources like Torque Esports or iRacing or so many new things that are popping up, especially because of the pandemic. So, the argument is just that there's always something for everybody, no matter what the demographic is. They're literally, your target could be 45 to 60-year-old females. And I'd say you should be talking, what's the name of the company that does Candy Crush?
No, King? No.
It is King, right? So them, right? Like you should be looking at doing some kind of a paid promotion to run commercials in their program. So just as a whole, I think we need to bring more awareness to the fact that there's an audience everywhere, right? And there's always a fit for whoever you're going after. And inherently where I want to open up the discussion a little bit for us is why there's so much value in those ones that aren't quite popular yet, because I think it's totally underrepresented in how big these audiences are. What are your thoughts on that?
That's the entire reason that we work with indie studios, right? Because we saw the exponential growth opportunity there. Their audiences are smaller than you might see for Fortnite, but also the teams are smaller, right? So I'm able to reach out directly to the person that I reach out to from the team is either the person who can make the decision for us to work together or sitting most likely literally next to the person who can make the decision. So it's easier to get business done. And I think that they're more receptive to those types of growth opportunities. They're willing to take a little bit of risk here and there. You don't get that from publicly traded AAA game studios because they're publicly traded, right? They have to get consistent 20% margins quarter over quarter or whatever the percentage is. Otherwise, heads will roll. So they take as many risks, which is why you're just now seeing, the war zones from the Call of Duties when, PUBG, which is from Bluehole Studios, which is an indie studio in South Korea, started PUBG well before 2017 when Fortnite came out, right?
Right.
And then that became mass market as they started to see the adoption. So I think there's great opportunity there. And again, the bigger opportunity, I think, is getting that product placement in game. And I think you have the ability to do that more easily with an indie studio than you can potentially with like EA for Madden.
I think that's a really good point too, Marcus, is the ability to do creative things with indie studios. You're hitting the nail on the head that when we look at some of those AAA studios and the largest organizations, I mean, think about corporate America. When you're working through corporate, it's not that they're ineffective companies. They're slower though, and there's a lot more processes and approvals that you have to go through to get anything done. And that's the same thing like when you're looking at partnerships. When you're working with a small company that maybe has a smaller budget, they're certainly going to move quicker though when they like something. And one of the fun things about working in partnerships in esports and gaming is, we kind of try to look for those opportunities with maybe not necessarily indie titles, but groups and organizations that are representing a less than the premium top of funnel, League of Legends style opportunity. And League of Legends may still have flexibility. It's just they're at that stage where they've reached such unbelievable mass numbers that, their advertising campaigns have hit a premium mark. And, the argument is always there that you've got something like Fortnite or League of Legends that reaches mass audiences when you put on a big tournament. It's going to cost you a big chunk of change to get involved with that. And that immediately excludes 95% of brands that may be looking at tapping into esports, right? But that 95% can still achieve a similar overall reach by peanut butter spreading across, 3 or 4 different indie titles over a longer period of time. And to your point, with more creativity and more flexibility to do things that are outside of the box, which I think that should be part of our discussion as well, is esports as a community seems to be more open to weird, and like testing out things that are a little bit out of the box, a little bit of a stretch. I think just staying focused on traditional media packages. When you look at sports, my logo here, a call out from the caster when I get back from a commercial break, a lower third. Those things exist in esports, but you're seeing brand after brand after brand come into the space and leave the space because they didn't see any ROI from that. And it's because the people that are fans of gaming are doing the same thing that the people on TV are doing, which is when that commercial pops up, I'm walking away, right? So in order to have an effect on esports and gaming, I think you need to impact gaming fans' passion points in a positive way. You need to bring something to the experience that makes their lives better, rather than just look to get your brand awareness, in front of them. I mean, if brand awareness is your play, there's certainly money well spent. The CPMs in esports and gaming are better than anything else in traditional media, but that's a whole nother can of worms.
Yeah, it's grossly undervalued compared, like you said, to other traditional media formats. But I think to your point as well, the goal there is find a way to add value to the consumer instead of just extracting value out, right? It's engaging the consumer with your brand instead of you marketing at them. It's like us having a conversation versus like you're just listening to me talk, right? It's two different experiences. And I think especially younger demographics want to be more aligned with the brand and more involved with the brand's product and the brand experience and the product experience or service experience. So the degree that you can get a company to come into esports and say, let's make this a collaborative experience where we get some value out and then the end user also gets value, then I think it's a win-win for everyone and you'll get more engagement that way. Yeah,
there's no question. So when it comes to some of these I don't want to call them non-popular titles, indie titles, as you put it. What's the growth opportunity? What's the future look like within these specific segments? Because your book does a lot to help people outside the ecosystem step in. I'd make the argument that investors should be flooding to those titles that are not popular yet because they do have dedicated communities. They do have huge opportunities for scalable growth. And, instead of just looking at, hey, the new Call of Duty is coming out, I want to get invested in the Call of Duty League. I'm not saying that that's not the right opportunity for a certain brand, but there's certainly some areas that they could find out a little bit more about esports first. And it seems to me that those opportunities live with indie titles. So why don't you speak a little bit to that and your book's focus on the growth potential of those indie areas?
Great question. I think a perfect example and the most relevant example is Fall Guys. I don't know if you've played that game yet.
Yeah, I'm familiar.
It's covered on USA Today. I think I've seen it in Forbes. I want to say their launch, they had over 500,000 views and 1.5 million users, right? Mm-hmm. I can't think of it. Justin from DreamHack made a comparison of the 500,000 views versus, I think it was 657,000 views that Apex Legends got when it launched, right? Which is a considerably higher amount of marketing spend to pay the streamers to get involved. And that's the opportunity, is that you're able to find something that's novel and fun, and it being family friendly expands the potential market base, right? Because if you look at Apex Legends, that's a hardcore gamers game, right? But Fall Guys, which is effectively Fortnite minus the killing, appeals to every age demographic.
Yeah, can I ask you, that's a great point. Like Apex, they spent a ton marketing that, getting the influencers involved, not at all apples to apples. And then you've got a thing like Fall Guys that they just kind of launched. There was awareness of it, obviously, but that had a lot more natural growth and organic. So where do you think Valorant fits in with that? Because that's been, there's a lot of hype around it. People are talking about it left and right. Many are saying that it's going to be the next Overwatch. Would you agree with that?
I think that Valorant has a tremendous opportunity because of the success of League of Legends. I've not played it personally, but they have an established base to work off of. So as long as they can hit all the necessary marks, then it should be a great title. But again, I haven't played it, so I can't speak to the quality of the experience.
Where do titles like that, though? Because you mentioned Apex Legends. Valorant, I would say, is probably closer to an Apex Legends in just look and feel than maybe some of the other indie titles we've talked about. Where does it fit in that field? Because it is popular, it's being talked about en masse. It seems like it's going to be an esport that's reaching that kind of premium AAA level. So, or at least has the potential to.
I saw Team Liquid just announced that they built a team around Valorant. And to answer your question, sorry to cut you off, but I think it definitely has potential there. It does feel more like I don't know if you ever played. I can't think of the game. Team Fortress 2. It reminds me heavily of Team Fortress 2, which is a Steam.
Yeah, I did not. I didn't play it. I'm just wondering, if you're an investor, for instance, looking to get into the industry, does Valorant has so many positives and question marks at the same time, right? First-person shooter, that's maybe a negative from brand investments. But it's cartoony, so it's not really Call of Duty. And, so you're kind of like operating in this weird gray area that you're just not sure. And we also don't know if the esports community is going to adopt it as one of those premium titles. Like there are games that are made to be esports that don't end up being esports, right? A great example is 2K came out with it. I'm trying to remember the name of the game, but it was Evolve, right? And it was, this game where one person's the monster, and then you've got 4 other people teaming up to take down the monster. It's a 1v4 format. I mean, I remember the hype because I was working for an agency that was working with Take-Two at the time. So we were aware that this game's coming out long before it came out, right? And the hype internally in the company was, this is going to be one of the biggest esports titles of the year. The E3 release was huge. Like, all of this money and marketing spend put into it, that was never an esports. That was never an esport. It never took off. And I think you just don't have that crystal ball to say, where's it going to go? What kind of user base is it going to get? How popular is it going to get? There's no way to predict that. But with that said, there are a lot of titles that exist that are not the ones that you and I know as the popular esports titles, that are largely the same game with a dedicated fan base that present massive opportunity for flexibility, like we've been talking about. So for every League of Legends, there's a Smite, Dota 2, arguably Arena of Valor if you're talking mobile, right. And then within each title, there's that same thing. There's the leader of the pack that costs a premium. It becomes the top of funnel. There's huge esports events put on around it. You get all the top teams in the world, and it becomes an extremely expensive and ambitious project to get involved with. But there's these huge user bases that are in games that are just like it, that they like for different reasons, but it's largely the same. And I think there's a lot of opportunity there in educating brands and helping them to enter that space. What is what are the end goals for you with the book in educating and making people aware of not just the movers and shakers within the industry and people that you should know if you want to get into the professional side, but the other parts of the overall ecosystem? What are you hoping to achieve with the book?
Ultimately, it's increasing accessibility to the market for people who aren't involved and for people who are in one of those silos, right? I see gaming as a silo from esports and esports as a silo from gaming. But I think as we start to educate more families about all of these lucrative STEM career opportunities in gaming and esports, they'll be more receptive to their kids pursuing that as a career or as a hobby, right? It's a hobby that becomes a profession. Mm-hmm. And then as students understand that there are schools actually dedicated to game design and esports management programs, they may choose those schools over other schools, which might in turn expand demand and motivation for colleges to start integrating esports and gaming seriously into the entire experience. Not just having a handful of professional or varsity teams and an esports lab. Like, how do you teach math from the perspective of esports? How do you teach history from the perspective of game design, right? How do you leverage the inherent interests of the student, which is your customer, right, to meet them where they are and so that you can achieve your goals in a way that's most effective for them? That's the ultimate goal of this book.
That's great. And I do know that esports is becoming a part of curriculum topics. I wouldn't say it's a focus right now for a lot of schools that are implementing it into, sports career businesses. I know they're starting to have the conversation about esports. I've done a few lectures at CU Boulder on it, but I think there's still a gap, and your book does a lot to help bridge this, of making people aware that those opportunities are coming, right? And they need to. And I would almost make the argument that kids don't know enough that there's careers out there, right? Everybody, think about it, when you're growing up playing a sport, you're aspiring to be a pro. And it takes an awful lot to become a professional athlete, regardless of sport. Professional at whatever it might be is going to be a long road. And gaming is no different. But I do think that there's more opportunity to work in the professional side of gaming than any other industry of the last 100 years. I mean, you can get involved and get a career if you're 16 years old at a local LAN center, So just being willing to get into it is part of that knowledge gap, that it shouldn't just be for parents. It's also for, the kids that are gaming, realizing, there was this great commercial that the NCAA used to run during March Madness, where it was like, there's over, 190,000 student athletes in the United States, and over 99% of us are going to go in professional in something that isn't sports, right? And I felt like that was a really powerful message. And I think the same stat, if not greater, it's probably 99.9% of gamers are not going to become professional esports players. So I think educating them on the fact that there are careers and opportunities out there and being a resource is one thing that you're going a long way to helping to achieve. And I commend you for writing the book and being a part of the solution.
I appreciate that. One of the other things we're doing is creating a digital companion that's $20. This book's going to retail at $99. We want it, again, to be as accessible as possible. So, if you can't afford the hardcover book, you still have access to the information, because we need that to drive those conversations. To your point, if you look at esports in the gaming industry, people either think you're a live streamer, right, a content creator, or you're a professional player, and that's about it. I saw an infographic that was shared by Leslie Fitzsimmons over at Beasley Media Group that showed 88 career opportunities in just esports. And remember, esports is only 1% of a larger $152 billion market. So there's all of these opportunities, from accounting to legal, obviously game design and broadcasting and writing and all of that most students, parents, and schools aren't really tapping into. There are people who, even today, right now, haven't been laid off, unfortunately, in light of the quarantine and the COVID pandemic, who may have a great opportunity to do a career shift into gaming and esports, but they don't know that these opportunities exist, especially considering that this market is, in some regards, growing exponentially. Not the live event segment, but everything else is.
I love that, Marcus. I mean, why not right now? How many people in the United States right now have just lost their jobs, that are fans of gaming and esports, that have passionately looked at this as a fan, that are now realizing, there's this great commencement speech that Jim Carrey did a few years ago, where he talks about how his father was the funniest guy he knew, a great comedian, but he was too scared to take a risk and start a career as a comedian. And instead, he took the safe job. And when he lost that job and his family really struggled for 2 years, he learned a valuable lesson about life, that you can fail at doing something you don't love. So you might as well spend all of your time and energy trying and potentially failing at something that you do, right? I know that you will lose less sleep over trying for the one that you dream about. So I think now is the perfect opportunity for you to take that leap in your career. Start to add time. There are work from home opportunities to collaborate and participate and help put on esports events. There are more than 1,000 ways, literally, to get involved. Call your local esports or gaming organization that's in the area and introduce yourself and say, look, I'm just willing to pick up a broom. I'm here to help, and that's all anybody wants that's running any organization, is a feeling of community and a feeling that we're all a part of the same team trying to make a better product, because gaming is about community. It's about feeling that sense of connected tissue. And I think, that's why we've seen so much growth in it during the pandemic, is because it's kept a lot of people together. And, it's given us something to look forward to, because our worlds have shrunk, right? Mine is the walls of my house, my front yard, my dog, and the grocery store, and then the people that we call on the phone and these types of interactions. And I think having that ability to get out and build a sense of community within gaming is what people adore so much about it. And that's why people are as avid fans as they are. So for those that don't understand, that's a little bit of why.
And I agree with that. I'd like to add, there's an amazing opportunity to work with the indie studios. Again, 75% of potentially all games are made by independent game studios. And those are small businesses, right? They're not publicly traded corporations. Many of them, having worked with hundreds of them around the world, many of them are small businesses that are bootstrapped. So they have day jobs like I do, right? And then they turn around and build their game on nights and weekends because it's their passion project. So that means, A, they don't have a budget to hire a big team, and B, they're always eager for extra support. So especially if someone is willing to just donate even 5 hours a week of their time at an indie studio, I can guarantee you in your local market you have an indie studio making a game. Guarantee you that that's the case. So you do that, right? You donate your time 5 hours a week for a month. now maybe you've helped them generate revenue where they can pay you something. If not, at the very least, you now have relevant experience in the gaming industry in your professional, functional area of expertise that you can take to potentially a for-profit, AAA game studio or esports company.
Too many people are afraid to make the investment in themselves. Okay, if I'm not getting paid an hourly fee, well, why am I doing it? We're not saying go abandon your job or whatever pays your bills or whatever you have to do to hustle. But that's where it starts. You could argue that my first 2 years of work in the esports industry was unpaid. There wasn't anything coming to me from it, but I was leaning into it because I knew there was an opportunity there and I was willing to earn my way into it. So it's proving that value, right? It's deciding for yourself that this is something I'm going to be a part of and I'm going to make the product better in whatever small facet that I'm going to control. I'm going to offer my time to learn first, then start to create value. Because I don't think you just come in from day one and all of a sudden you're MVP. You come in and you make a lot of mistakes. And fortunately, I think gaming as well is really open to people coming in and messing up, frankly, and learning their way up the ladder because everybody's done it before you. This is all new. This isn't an industry that's established. To your point, there aren't key educational systems in place. We're not brought up and trained in a system that leads us right to gaming careers. So, the people that are pioneering the industry right now are the Neil Armstrongs of gaming, right? So, they made mistakes when they were getting started. And I think they're very open and responsive to people that are just willing to share their passions, So it's a really exciting industry to be a part of. And, I know the industry at large is lucky to have people like you involved with it that are doing a lot to bridge the knowledge gap and, continue to push it forward for the collective greater good. So thanks for coming on, Marcus. We really appreciate having you. How can people get in touch if they want to reach out about the book?
They can email me, marcus@projectmq.com. We are rebranding soon, but I'll continue to get emails there. I also spend a decent amount of time on LinkedIn networking. I always believe that, I improve the quality of my network by investing in the people in it. And that's how I've built the success I've had over the last 7 years or so. So please connect with me there. Glad to make any introductions to anyone. If you see someone in my network you'd like me to introduce you to, glad to do that. And that's it for now. I'm on Twitter, I'm on Facebook, but Marcus Esports Howard is the best way to reach me.
Awesome.
Link.
Please click the link to follow the podcast and stay tuned with episodes as they come out each week. Thanks again, Marcus, for joining us. We'll put all your information in the bio as well so people can reach out. Really appreciate you coming on, man.
Excellent. Thank you for your time. I look forward to the success of your business as well with Hive Gaming, and let me know if there's anything I can do to help.
Sounds good, buddy.